All right. Well, hello everybody. It's you got another comp tool conversation today, and today we've got Kevin Rains, who is the president of CompExecs, which is a staffing. Would you say staffing agency, Kevin, or
executive search firm focused on total rewards? How about that?
That's much better. Well, so I'm super excited to have you join us today. I think this is going to be a really fun conversation because I think it's one that's really personal to a lot of us compensation guys and compensation girls, and compensation people. And I think what we have found really is that compensation this year has really kind of come to the forefront of HR along with some other roles. Because of what we're seeing happening in the market right now. And so I think that for us, that means there's a lot of opportunities as compensation people, but it also means that there are a lot of opportunities for those of us that are in the field trying to make sure we keep people with our organization. So, again, thank you so much for joining off, but just for those of us, aside from what we just said, you've got a background in compensation yourself. Tell us where you come from. What do you do?
I've been around a long time. I began my career in finance, M&A, strategic planning, that type of thing, and then fell into comp like everybody else does. Nobody grows up and says, "I want to be a comp person one day." Everybody knows how it happened. I ended up leading the comp function at Verizon, and then did a lot at Bank of America, especially in their consumer comp function, as well as their international comp and ben space, and then spent time leading C. And then about 9 years ago, Ed Talley, who many people may be familiar with, who started CompExecs 20 years ago, reached out to me and said, "Retire. What do you think about taking over my business?" And I'm kind of a closet LD guy anyway. I love the coaching and mentoring piece of this. And so I said, done. So I sit out on the farm and I talk to people who do what I used to do for a living, and it makes me happy.
And when you say farm, what do you mean by farm? Because I think that's one of the things I've enjoyed learning about you.
It is a 48-acre tree farm on the border of North Carolina and South Carolina. It's basically filled with walking trails and trees and ponds, and it's kind of my little slice of heaven that I looked for a long time, and finally found it. So it's a special place.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And so if we start to have any choppiness with the video or anything, or any challenges, since Kevin lives quite literally in the middle of nowhere, we may switch over to audio only. But so far things are so good. So we will keep it as video for as long as we can. So pardon us if it gets choppy, but I think really what we're most interested in is kind of what Kevin's got to say versus the background or anything else that we can see. So we'll kind of keep plugging through it. But guys, if I think about what's happening in the market right now and what we've just seen in the last 12, 18, 24 months, I've never seen anything like it. I've been in comp for about 15 years. I think you've been in it for a little bit longer. And I mean, kind of, does this remind you of anything else that you've ever seen?
No, this is uncharted territory. Usually this time of year is nuts anyway, right? It's this, I've got an article that basically says this is the peak season, right? Between when end is over, incentives are paid, equity vests, performance discussion, the comp team is tired, the grass looks greener on the other side. Between the beginning of March, the middle of June, the shares takes place. The majority of the seasonal change takes place, and then everybody goes on vacation, and it heats up a little bit in November. In September is in November, and then heats up again the following season. It's almost like clockwork usually. Not so the case. It was just wild from about August until right up to now. I've never seen anything like it. Just unprecedented, incredible amount of competition. I think it's going to be fascinating to see how the whole remote component works over time. But right now, I talk to clients all the time that are saying, "Hey, can you help me?" And I'm like, well, let me ask you 3 questions. Are you willing to pay compensation levels above pre-COVID? Are you open to considering remote or at least hybrid? A culture that is verifiably strong, a place that has leaders. And if you can't answer yes to all 3 of those questions, I can't really help you. It's the competition is incredibly strong. So I'll take a pause there and let you drill in wherever you want.
Yeah, and that's a great kind of note too. So on the LinkedIn Lives, one of the nice things is we can actually take questions from everybody. So if you do have any questions as Kevin is walking through anything, if there's anything you want to make sure we cover, feel free to put that as a comment, and that will pop up on our screens, and we'll address those things. But one of the things I know that you don't just focus on comp; you do a wide, or it's the total reward space. Have you seen that any particular parts of the total reward space have really increased more or less than others, or are there really pockets that are just super hot, or whether it be that or industries or locations, or I'm thinking of I hear
so I think
it's crazy,
the hottest role always continues to be, and that would be exec comp. So anybody who's listening who wants to increase their marketability and their career over time, the pyramid in terms of sought after capability is that an exec comp. Broad-based comp is great, sales comp is great, but if and benefits, all those things, but the exec comp space continues to just be white hot. So if you've got capability in that space, you'll never be unemployed. That said, that tends to be one of the tougher jobs to do. A lot of times those folks are the ones who are leaving at night, and those are the ones who are there on the weekends more, not just in comp season, but every time you have a comp committee meeting. And so there's just, my experience has been they tend to be the highest paid among their peer group within the comp space and the highest sought after within the comp space. Funny anecdote, but I think there are fewer and fewer people coming into space at the comp analyst level. Just in the last 18 months, I have just seen a huge increase in the demand for compensation analysts. And it's amazing to me how few people there are who are coming into the discipline in that space. I think those are tough jobs. They're not, they're great jobs. I enjoyed the comp space, and I think it's quantitative in nature. It's really related to the business. You get kind of a bird's eye view of what's going on across the space. They're wonderful jobs, but they're hard work. And I think a lot of people got burnt out over the COVID season and some of the other things that took place. And now we're kind of rebuilding that next generation of early career comp talent.
Interesting. So so finding the entry level folks is becoming more difficult in the comp space.
And I don't really play in that space much. I'm old enough. I get the Denny's discount around long enough that my network is primarily in the senior manager to VP of rewards space. But everybody I talk to seems to be, that's the hardest time attracting and then subsequently retaining talent. Trying to find the person with 2 to 3 years of comp analyst experience, either a consulting house or in a strong comp function in a good company, those folks can write their ticket. The key thing is, I was going to say, the key thing is the ability to work remotely. A lot of people have gotten very comfortable with this. I think depending on the industry you're in, you're seeing companies start to roll that back a bit, with hybrid models. Everybody's trying to figure it out. I don't think anyone has the secret sauce yet as to how it's going to really work. And who knows if we've got another wave of COVID coming through again. It's just an unknown at this point. But I think there are a lot of companies that I'm aware of that are starting to say, we do want people in the office. I've got some clients that have just, the guys in the plants have to be here. Therefore, the people on the corporate side need to be here. It's only fair. And I thought this is a fascinating way to look at it. But I will not be surprised to see the full-scale remote adoption that we've had start to roll back a little bit. I may be wrong, but it'll be an interesting ride.
Well, and what do you tell, like if you're working, I know that you mentioned there were a couple of requirements that you had. There are kind of strong recommendations for clients that you take on for those three different things that they consider before you would be able to really kind of effectively find folks. And I think one of those, the second one might have been, you said open to remote work.
Or hybrid, right? Something
or hybrid,
to
sure.
that effect. I think
So what do you say to
you have to be there 5 days a week. It's just hard to find talent that has been remote for a long time and then is choosing. They're out there. It's just complicated to find.
So what are you saying to those companies that do have that response, that do want people to come back into the office? I mean, I think from a sourcing issue or being able to find the right people, it's quite difficult. What we're hearing with a lot of folks is that it's very difficult to, or that you're having a lot more opportunity to bring people on if there are a number of, if you are able to support that remote work. But there are some folks that are hesitant to that. But as from your side, what are you telling people when they are kind of nervous about, that hybrid model or that remote work model?
From a client perspective, I understand it. Again, I did get the Denny's discount. So I remember after 9/11, lots of folks got to work remotely and then it kind of got rolled back in. I remember after the financial crisis, a lot of financial services firms rolled out remote in a big way and then they kind of sucked it. I think this time we have much greater adoption. I think we have much greater technology. But I think the LD folks are still going to pipe up at some point and say, we have an experience level of development capability that remotely that we've been able to experience with people working in some type of hybrid or occasional office situation. And I think that's going to start pushing people a little bit more. I think if you're in tech, if you're in pharma, the remote thing could roll along forever, depending on which company you're in. I think if you're in manufacturing, especially if you're in a lesser globally oriented firm, I wouldn't be surprised if people coming back into the office at some point.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's one where every company has to find their sweet spot, right? It's what are you comfortable with or with? What can your culture handle, right? Because cultures are 90% of this deal. If you're in a culture to where you have embraced remote and it's not a question of a novelty, but it's truly interwoven into your culture, this could go on. It's brilliant. I think if you embraced it as novelty during COVID, and now you're trying to bring people back in and they're saying, we don't want to come back in. I think it's going to be a challenging time for those firms to maintain their talent base. Other folks will have gotten used to it and said, I can go to some of these other industries or other companies and have the opportunity to work remotely. So this is one that I have no silver bullet for. It's one where you've got to create environments where people want to work. I know the old age of people leave bosses, not companies, and people because of leadership and culture more than money. There's a lot around right now. I'm seeing insane levels of increases. But at the end of the day, it still comes down to, is there a leader I want to follow? And is that a culture that I feel I can trust?
Yeah. And that's interesting too. We're currently actually running a poll right now that asks, what's the most important thing when it comes to recruiting, retaining, and engaging employees? There's 4 options. It's, paying at the market median. It is meaningful work. It is opportunity, and it is cultural alignment. And by far, what we are seeing is that, and we've got about 500 people that have voted now, and primarily they are compensation people. But the most important thing is it's either opportunity or it's engaging work. And I think that's one of the interesting things that we have seen in what we're hearing is that still is true, even irrespective of what we've seen the market do. And I think David Needham, he had a good point where he said, the competitive rates is that is the gatekeeper. You have to have those things to start with, but then beyond that, recruiting and retaining folks. And I think that's a great point. But I would, one of the questions I'm thinking of is we're thinking of these different things. Have you seen companies doing different things? I mean, we have seen this pretty tremendous growth, and it's getting harder to hire these roles. But what have you seen in kind of in your role with companies trying to really kind of create that value proposition for employees that maybe some of the folks that are on the webinar could take back and say, those are things that we could probably do for our organization as well to make sure we're recruiting and retaining and engaging folks?
This isn't going to be a sexy answer, but it's one, having built a lot of teams, at the end of the day, people want to be valued and treated with dignity and respect. If you have that type of environment and you can stop somebody in the hallway and say, do you feel valued and feel treated with dignity and respect? I bet they don't have a turnover problem. You can bring in all the massage tables you want on Friday and Taco Tuesdays and all that really cool stuff to come up with novel things. But at the end of the day, it's about creating a core culture that people want to be a part of. I think companies who are have a reputation that people want to be a part of. I think the whole COVID experience has woken people up to life is short. I want to be doing something that's important and of value. It's fascinating to see a lot of mission-driven organizations starting to pick up talent in places they've never been able to pick it up before, because people are saying, I've got so many more years that I want to play. I want to make it count with it. There's a lot of different ways to do that, but it's pretty straightforward for me. It's create a culture of dignity and respect and give people opportunities, invest in people. It's the same things that have been around a long time.
Yeah, I think that's great. And it really, it's a great answer. And I think Hannah has a really great question that really kind of nicely moves with this. So, she's asking if are you finding, and I guess it's a good question for really anybody that's on this call, that comp professionals are needing to work longer hours now. And I have found that there are certainly periods of time, throughout the year where it's merit or X, Y, and Z, or merit or promotional cycles, or project-based or salary survey submission times of the year where comp professionals are working more. Have you found that we're asking more of comp professionals? You said we're hiring fewer. It's harder to find the level, the entry level folks. Do you think that's because we're demanding more from our comp professionals now?
I think that's going to vary company by company, but I wouldn't be surprised if people have worked harder over the last 18 months than they maybe did the previous 18 months. And I think the complexities of having, especially if you have anything to do with sales comp or incentive comp, lots of variables in motion with the economy and things that are happening with available workforce, et cetera. So I wouldn't be surprised if people are working harder. I think what may be pushing that as well is I think there's fewer people. There are probably a lot of open positions in almost every organization of scale that weren't traditionally open more than 30, 60 days, that may have been open longer, or they're having to hire people with a less developed skill set within those jobs. Because I think there are a number of people that got off the bus. Frankly, again, comp jobs are not easy jobs. So the question is, can I go do something else? And I don't want to demean any other group, but there are some groups that candidly don't work as hard hours as compensation people do. But I'll also caution people to say, people usually in any HR function are first the CHRO, then the head of rewards, and then often a head of exec comp or a head of comp that reports into the head of rewards. And those people all the way down may be paid more than some of the head of rewards peers are. So you get paid well in comp. It's one of the highest paying disciplines within the HR function, but there's no free lunch. And I think people are feeling that a little bit more in this time.
Yeah, I mean, I see, there's a couple of comments that have come up, and, compensation has become more complex over the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even more so in the last 5 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then, there's another comment that, it's comp has become, it's demanding and it's undervalued, which it's tough. I mean, it is I would say the most demanding, most undervalued job is oftentimes the payroll folks, just because you have to be 100% correct in that role.
Mm-hmm.
But
here's what I just say to the comp people who are, I get it, and it's a hard road, and I've been down it many, many times. It's a season, right? Who knows? Mm-hmm. The last 18 months have been really rough for a lot of people. I think it may have been amplified because of the complexities in the comp space. Comp's a great job. I think a lot of people, it's kind of like you forget what you have from time to time. As a comp professional, you have access to information about the business that 99% of the company will never see. As a comp professional, you have an opportunity to usually help the business do something materially, even at the comp, consultant level, manager level, analyst level, whatever it may be. If you're engaged with the business, to do something really impacts people's lives. Somebody goes home and has the ability to talk to them about what happened to their, related to their performance. Oh no, is it happening? You're frozen, or you're sitting really still. Are you there? Justin.
Let's see.
Can you see me?
There we go. I can see it. We're back. Okay.
Yay! Sorry about that.
No, I think it might have been on my side. Well, great. So, all right,
I was
hopefully we're all
in the middle of some powerful encouragement from my friends in the comp space. They say, don't take for granted what you have. I fully agree, sympathize, and feel that, especially during the year-end cycle, intense time. But comp is a field that you have an opportunity to make a real difference. You have an opportunity to impact and understand the business. You have an opportunity that should be highly valued in the organization. It's a cool job. Take heart. It's good stuff, and I think we've just been a really challenging season. But to a lot of people, yes, your team needs to staff up and distribute the work a little bit better because it's been a little bit too tight lately. And my guess is the organizations who aren't doing it are feeling some friction, and it'll hit equilibrium at some point where people will do what they need to do to make sure they're keeping the people that they need to.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And I think as we're kind of moving down the path of what does it mean to people personally, What are you suggesting, or how are you working with folks to have them decide when they decide it's time for me to go find a different role in the comp space or the HR space? It seems like there's such a great demand for our positions now that we have a lot of opportunities that we probably didn't have, not too terribly long ago.
Yeah.
What kind of advice would you give someone that's looking to make a change? And not just necessarily in terms of, where to go or if it's time to go, but how or should we be really kind of capitalizing on this great demand now? I know it's kind of I'm playing the devil's advocate a little bit, but really thinking not from a comp person or a comp manager, but as a person that now I recognize that my value is probably more than it was 6 months ago. How can I maximize my own personal value? What advice are you giving folks?
So my calls with people tend to be a little bit longer than most. I tend to really try and understand what's important to people. So I go through, if you again go out to my website, there's a bunch of little articles down at the bottom that I've written solely to try and help people. And there's one called Considering a Career Move, Look Deep Before You Leap, or something cheesy like that. I wish I would have renamed it now that I think about it. But it has an exercise where I ask anybody who I'm working with to go through it. And you basically go through and have an old school brainstorming session with yourself on what it is that has brought you joy in the past and will help you fulfill your future dreams in terms of attributes of a role. And they're like, that's so ethereal. And I'm like, well, that's the most important question you have to ask yourself. And most people don't have the courage to just start brainstorming, role content, relationship with boss, compensation, geography, work-life balance, go down and just start blurting things out, writing them down until you're about 20 points deep. I want beige paint on the wall. And then you'll be exhausted, and then you'll want to stop, and then you're only halfway done. Then go through and force yourself to stack rank the top 5. Literally put an app of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as to what has brought you joy and what is going to help you fulfill your hopes and dreams. Have somebody validate that, because who's in comp is usually a high achiever wherever I'm, and they're used to knowing what the right answers are to say and the right answers on the test and all that. This isn't about that. This is in the mirror deep. Have your significant other validate it, and then what's in my 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 box. And whenever you get a search partner call or somebody from your own internal folks looking for a new job, say, how does this role align with what I said was important to me? And again, I said at the beginning, comp is interesting. Compensation, yeah, the earlier you are in career, the less this is going to make sense to you. But with every birth, the compensation level was a little bit less important. And who I worked with, what they represented, what they valued, and how they treated me meant a whole lot more than the zeros behind the numbers. So I think you'll find your list evolves over time, but you pull that piece of paper out and it's a consistent filter through which you can assess internal and external opportunities over time. Put it in a desk drawer, pull it out each time, and then say, how does this align with what I said I wanted? Does that make sense?
No, I think that's a fantastic feedback. And I think it's something too that I think clearly it's ringing true to most of us in the industry, but I think too, that's a great way to really kind of start off a stay conversation with employees that maybe looking externally. Because I think what we have seen in this area has been a lot of change happening, and managers, leadership, they really want to make sure that we are preserving the most valuable, the largest expense that we have as a company, that is our people. Mm-hmm. So I think if you can really kind of sit down with folks, if you think about doing that internally, maybe the person that, if you have that right relationship, maybe the person that validates that is your manager. I've been in those situations where I had a relationship like that, where I could sit down with my manager and say, I think that it may be time for me to look at something else. And if you could actually sit down and have those 5 key points, it's going to give the manager an opportunity to address those concerns and kind of identify if those things could or could not happen within the current company you're in, or if they can provide a reference. Imagine how great that would be to have a reference from your current manager as you're looking for another opportunity.
And by the way, it's okay to leave. A lot of people, you don't ever want to leave someone in a difficult position or burn bridges. If you're a great leader, your goal is to one day retire Sally Joe's Cube and put a little thing like a movie theater crossing across it and say, this is Sally's Cube. She left to go to XYZ company, but she was phenomenal. From Andy Stanley years ago. And I love it. Lead people well while you have the opportunity to lead them. And they do leave. Be a strong enough leader to have built a team that is not person dependent. The people that are freaking out right now are the ones who have created a lot of their own problems. So the reason you have a 25th pile in your surveys is because there are companies that pay at the 25th percentile, right? So if you were at the 25th percentile and this is kind of a strange anomaly I'm seeing right now, but let's say you're in a geographically remote place, manufacturing oriented organization, and you've been able to pay 25th percentile because you were the only game in town, right? Now all of us, and you've built some pretty folks over time, but you haven't necessarily treated them the best. Now all of a sudden, a lot of the tech companies who have got the figured out, their LD people are on board, and you can work remotely all day long. They're finding a huge untapped source of talent in Middle America, in Florida, in a lot of the non-income tax states. Go to Texas, go to Tennessee, and all of a sudden these folks are making less than they should because they've been locked up with these companies in these small, mid-sized towns. And all of a sudden you have a name brand tech company they call them up and say, hey, I hear you're pretty good. I'm looking at your credentials. Would be open to this. And by the way, I'm not going to pay you that are aligned with the Bay Area. I'm going to pay you a whole lot more than Midtown, whatever, XYZ, Northeastern or Midwestern state. You're going to be happy because you get to be remotely. Might ask you to work West Coast hours, but not more money, but less money than I'd have to pay if I hired somebody here. Everybody's happy except the company that's had you locked up at the 25th percentile because they didn't think you had any place to go. I think those organizations are in a world of hurt because there's a brand new kid in town who's going after their talent that they'd never had to compete with before. And it's a fascinating dynamic to watch. You are locked up again, my friend. Justin.
Okay. Well, that was exciting.
It wasn't me. It wasn't the farm. It's beautiful.
Yeah, we had a power outage for a brief moment. So I'm sure we lost a few people, but no, actually, we didn't lose too many. So I'm glad we're back. So apologies for those technical difficulties. That's the first time we've had that happen. But so tell me, where were we before we got cut off?
I think, to be candid with you, I don't exactly recall. I think I was basically saying the companies that have been in the position to hold people at the 25th percentile and felt like people didn't have anywhere to go, or even take the 25th percentile out, but just feel for whatever reason they didn't have to create the environment to keep people. I think they're all in a world of hurt, because even companies who are strong and culturally, in compensation and leadership, they're having a hard time retaining people. But I think it's to try and say, I'm just going to catch up now by spending a pile of money. One, I don't think it's going to work. And two, I think the cultural norms that are going to be required to change in a lot of those companies, that takes time. And so I think it's going to be challenging over the next few years for those organizations that haven't taken culture, leadership, compensation really seriously over the last few years.
Yeah.
What questions can I answer? Just any questions that you might have, or anything that the folks on the phone or the stream have?
Well, I think probably most people are home with their remote workers. It's true. But I think, what do you have anything that you've seen where companies are really effectively able to keep their current talent, whether they're retention bonuses, stay conversations, changing people's jobs, or changing their benefit packages?
Well, I got clients on Wall Street, and the drug of choice up there is retention, right? And so as soon as you see your top folks starting to go, you start slapping a bunch of literally millions of dollars of retention dollars across different functions on. And the challenge with that is that you want it again, and you want it again. It's kind of strange to watch it become almost a cyclical part of your compensation, to say, well, I'm kind of used to this now. And it creates a very odd relationship between you and your leader, when the only reason everybody knows you're staying is because of the retention. That's not that way in a lot of industries, or there's a lot of great financial services companies out there that don't do that, but it's a tool that I think is overused right now, because it does nothing but create pain later. So it just postpones the pain.
Interesting. Okay. We got a question from a couple of folks. So you can see that. So can you talk more about your view of comp credentials? So are you finding that more companies are asking for folks to be CCP, so have their CCP?
Mm-hmm. It depends on the client, but there are some. It's actually kind of funny, because a lot of people who have them want people who have them. So it is. Me, I like the credentials a lot, because it shows a commitment to the discipline. You learn things, but more importantly, you demonstrate that this is a space that I'm not just flitting through. I want to be committed to this discipline. I want to understand it. Yep. I'm working just specifically. UB is great. The exec comp certifications are great. The certified benefits professionals are great. Those who are in stock administration, that absolutely you want those credentials. Do you have to have them? No. From time to time, so I've got my own database, right? So I got all the tools that everybody else has, but then Ed started this years ago, and he built a database, and then I've been playing with it for the last 9 years. And so it's pretty good in terms of people and who's available and what talent, etc. And there are days that I will source, some of my criteria will be on certain certifications. And if there are groups that don't have those certifications, or folks that don't have those certifications, they're not going to show up in my search. Now, I very rarely use that as a singular criteria.
Sure.
But it's one that it's absolutely a differentiator for some clients.
Interesting. Are you finding that companies are asking for those credentials more now, or are people becoming a little more relaxed with the requirements just in order to fill the seats?
I actually haven't seen that change much. So for the companies that it's important to, they've been reasonably consistent with keeping that it's important. And for companies that didn't really care before, you're not really caring now. So I haven't seen a material change in it, but I'm personally a fan of it. I think it's kind of like an MBA. It doesn't buy you anything to get you the MBA. It's a stamp on your forehead that basically shows a dedication to a certain type of education, a certain career trajectory, career path, etc. Do I have a lot of friends who have bachelor's degrees that can run circles around friends of mine that have MBAs? Absolutely, all and both ways. So the certifications are not an absolute; they're just a data point. But for a lot of companies, they're a point.
Yeah, no, I think some of the things that I found was, I have my CCP and I've maintained it over the years. And I think that the benefit of having it, especially for myself personally, was going to the classes and learning from the people that were there. I mean, the instructors have always been just phenomenal. I still remember the instructors I had, and I started earning my CCP 15 years ago. The first year I think I was in comp, I started earning, but I still remember, Brent Longnecker was one of my instructors, and I remember that name, and I remember he was such a compelling speaker, and I really wanted to push me into it, but also just the conversations we had with folks. So I think, especially, and I think this applies at all levels of your career, having those conversations and having that community is where a lot of value comes from in shaping and developing what you do as a comp person. And I think it's, to your point, in terms of what do other companies look for, I think it is a stamp that this is directionally, this is an important profession to me, and it's not something that I fell into and may fall out of. I'm putting the time in and kind of developing further on that. But you're right.
And I fully agree with your point on community. Going to those classes, building those relationships just creates a network of people to help you grow as a professional, and people pouring into each other in a common discipline who are all interested in that discipline does nothing but good. So I'm a big fan.
And do you think that, I haven't personally ever seen this, but this is more of a question on your personal opinion versus maybe not professional, a blend of both maybe. In terms of maintaining your certifications, how important do you think that is? Because I know that there are several things that we have to do throughout the years to maintain our certifications. But do you typically see folks ask for current certifications, or as an employer, have you seen companies really kind of be particular about, did you earn your CCP at one point ever, or are you current today?
It's more the do you have your CCP ever? I think the current day is a good thing because it keeps you again involved in that community. The classes that are updating you on, things have changed a lot in the last 10 years, right? And the most dangerous companies to me are the ones who think they're smarter than everybody else and never send their folks to any external training. They may one day wake up and find themselves in a big legal issue or in an inability to attract and retain people, because when you get in that mindset, it's very difficult to, it almost feeds on itself. And it's like, well, we're best practice. We're best practice. How do you know? Right? I would encourage all companies to support their people in going out and learning. Now, there's a risk in that. If you are holding on to your folks and you got a lousy culture and you're paying below median and you send your young green manager into a group of seasoned HR professionals in one of these classes, and they're like, hey, that one's got potential, you may be at risk, right? Because those working events as well. Just get unfiltered. But I'm a big fan of just continuing education of all kinds. Lifelong learning is huge, regardless of the topic.
Well, one of the great things I got me thinking about that too, or what other things you need to know to be successful compensation? Are there any that you've really kind of seen rise with the stack in last year or so? Are there any trends that are happening?
Again, I'm not sure. Just so if we go back to basics, everyone and their brother is putting in either Workday or Oracle, right? And before you can do that, you have to have a job architecture that makes sure what you're putting into those systems is actually what you want, right? So 101, before you put in a system like that, you got to make sure that your job architecture is good. So, and your comp structures are what you want them to be. Otherwise, you have to do a ton of rework later. So if people don't know how to create a job architecture and they don't know how to create a comp structure, go to class and learn it. It's not that complicated. Again, so many of these companies rely heavily on their external consultants and they never teach their own folks how to really do it. And I wrote an article, again, it's one out. I just keep referencing them because I write them because I think it's important information, called The Silent Career Killer. And I put it out each Halloween. It's kind of entertaining for people to read, but it's got a really scary reminder that if you become expert in your own company's compensation processes and just really, really good at navigating the principles and navigating the people in an organization, but you're never really learning anything new, at some point when the music stops and you don't have a chair and you go out to find another job, the core skills that you had when you went into that company had been dormant for a long, 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 long time. And there isn't anybody who wants to pay you what you've been paid to do what another company did, right? They want somebody who understands the discipline, who understands the technical requirements, et cetera, not just how to navigate an old organization. Does that make sense?
I think every company, there are the certain foundational things we have as comp people. Really being able to apply that. And I think there was a comment earlier, having the business acumen, being able to take those foundation, not apply a one size fits all approach to other companies, but being able to demonstrate and take the best practices that you know, the best experiences that you have, and being able to put those in place for the new company that you are doing with or that you just started with. That's what I took away from that.
I think it's just important to continue to be a student of your discipline, no matter how long you've been with the company, and being able to apply those skill sets wherever you go. I think, to put it another way, I think intellectual curiosity is life. As soon as you stop being intellectually curious, you become dormant, and nothing good ever comes from that. So whether it's learning a new discipline within the company you're at, whether it's continuing to grow the discipline that you're good at and you're in, it's easy to get overwhelmed with the volume of work and put development and intellectual curiosity on the back burner for another day. And that's a frog in a pot situation that will one day you'll wake up and it's really, really hot water. So I'm a huge advocate of intellectual curiosity and continuing to learn.
Yeah, and I think that's really one of the core things that I have seen during interview processes. A lot of questions, and tell me if you disagree, but I think a lot of folks, what they're really trying to suss out during the interview process is, can you do what you need to do? And a lot of times that comes back on, do you have the experience doing that? Well, we can't always have the experience we need, but
Mm-hmm.
I think
I'll
it's a
take somebody
mindset,
who's
and if you
smart,
illustrate your ability to.
Yeah, I'll take somebody who's smart with a highly intellectually curious approach and a little bit of experience over somebody who is deep in experience and lethargic all day long. So I think you can learn technical, you can't learn attitude, and you can't learn intellectual curiosity. I think those are from the heart. Those are character reflections. And I think as soon as you start thinking you know everything, bad things start happening.
I can fully agree with that.
So most of the people who call me, I get calls from folks years and years down the road. I tell people what I think they need to hear, not what they want to hear. I have zero filters in doing it. And I tell people 99% of the people really like it. And 1% of the people really, really hate it. And I'm okay with that because I think there's a lack of just candid discussion. So hopefully this has been helpful to just kind of put some things out there and just see how they resonate with people. At least it'll give them something to think about.
Yeah, no, I think it's been, a lot of for everybody. And I think even in times seen, a lot of it comes down to what makes you happy, what keeps you motivated, and, staying kind of star. You're doing what's right for you as you're looking for organizations are for the folks you work with. Mm-hmm. So we got Kevin Raines, the president of Total Awards. What did I say? What did you say again?
We're an executive search firm focused on total
executive. Thank you, boy. I think it's been a great, and I think wonderful to always wonderful to have you, Kevin. Always good to catch up.
I love our relationship, Justin. We've been talking a long time, and I really appreciate what you do in the compensation community. I think you've got a heart of trying to connect people and help people, good for both their organizations, but their people as well. And I greatly appreciate that. So thanks for taking the time to chat with me. Take care.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks again, Kevin. And again, Comp Tool conversation with Kevin Raines. We will, but don't forget that we've got Comp Tool Tuesdays, which are a little bit shorter and a little bit more direct. We've got these great conversations with folks like Kevin. So we'll look forward to the next one. For hanging in there as we had, but thanks for sticking through it.